Hi Victory Stitches. Sometimes when we're following a pattern it asks us to gather the fabric for a design purpose, for sleeves, aprons, ruffles on skirts, cushions, anything. And stick with me in this tutorial because we are going to learn how to gather fabric. Let's roll up our sleeves, we can do this! Hi and welcome back to Stitch to Victory. Today we are going to be looking at learning how to do a simple gathering stitch and stitching things together back on the machine. It's pretty simple. All you will need is a needle and thread. I've threaded this needle double and tied a knot just down in the end. So hand sewing needle, thread, some scissors and a sewing machine and your fabric, and we're ready to go. Now imagine, this is just a sample of course, but imagine you're sewing an apron, you could be sewing a skirt with a gather, one piece of a pattern fabric to another. The idea is you want to make something this wide fit onto something this wide. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our needle, which we've already threaded. Now let's assume for the sake of the example that our seam allowance is the usual 1.5 centimetres, which is 5/8 of an inch if you're doing garment making clothing. You're going to be starting at one end, following the pattern. It'll tell you to gather from A to B or whatever. For this example we're going to do the whole width of this fabric. And we're going to be inside that seam allowance. So that seam allowance is probably going to be around here. So we're going to be well inside that so that when we stitch our two pieces together, this big ugly old hand stitching won't be visible. So start by popping the needle in one end and you're just going to do a very basic back and forth, over and under running stitch. I'm not making it too wide so that way I can get finer gathers. The wider the gaps are between my stitches, the bigger the pleats are going to be, and it all depends on what look you're going for. But this is obviously a small piece, so we don't want big chunky gathers, you know, so we only end up with 2 or 3 over the whole piece. We want lots of fine ones so that it looks nicely evenly distributed. So there, I pull the thread through now. It's knotted down at one end so it won't come through, and I will just continue on my merry way until I get to the end. So we'll just switch to Spitfire mode just to get to the end, to speed things up a little. And there we have it. Now we want to make sure, so we've left the needle on there, so we can move our gathers around. It's a bit like when you buy curtains and you have to pull that tape in just to make the curtains fit the window. So we want it to be about so wide. Just going to spread those gathers out until they look more or less evenly distributed. There's the right width there. I'm actually going to fasten down this end now so we don't end up pulling more thread through and changing the width. And I'm just doing that by just a few stitches over and over, and that will anchor that into place. I'll just grab some scissors and snip that off. Move that needle away. So now we've got a nicely gathered piece of fabric. I don't think it's perfectly even at the moment, it's a bit flat over here and a bit bunched up here, so we're just going to move those around until we think it looks fine. There we go, I think that's a bit better. Now I'm going to grab my pin cushion. The beauty of this fabric is there is no right side. It's a woven fabric, so it's actually, I can pick which side is the right side, but normally, like I keep reminding you guys, you would pick the right sides together. Place the right sides together because that's going to hide your seams. So we're going to pin one to another. Now try and pin perpendicular to where your seam is going to run, because you can actually run your sewing machine down while keeping those pins in the fabric if you are very, very careful. So just keep pinning. One more. So looking from the other side, you can see where it gathers in place. We're going to take this to the machine and we are going to stitch down along here very, very carefully. We can stop and take the pins out, but I'm actually going to do it very, very slowly so that I run over the pins. Going slowly so that when the needle comes down to the pin, it can actually move over and not actually hit the pin and break. If you go too fast, you'll shatter your needle. But if you go nice and slowly, you can actually sew over the pins without actually hitting them. So, over to the machine. Right, we're back at the machine. I've lined my edge of my fabric up with the 5/8 of an inch, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. I've got the presser foot down just at the beginning. And I'm just going to sew a little bit and do a back stitch to anchor that into place. And here I am going really, really slowly over. I'm just approaching that pin and it's just gone over nice and simply and easily. Just keep going nice and slowly. One. This is particularly handy to keep the pins in. If you're making something like a ruffled or a gathered sleeve, you're dealing with quite a tight area, so it's nice to not have to keep stopping. You end up with a lot of pins, and it's nice to not have to keep stopping to pull them all out. Now that little click was the sound of the needle glancing off the pin. Because I was going slowly, it was able to move along and not do any damage. I'm also using a contrasting thread colour here at the moment. I would normally use, say, a pale green or a white or a cream on this fabric, but I'm using black so it shows up for the camera. Back stitch at the end and we're done. I'll just remove those pins. Here's the seam we've just sewn. Now if we move that up, you can see the nice, neat, even gathers. Flipping it over, I've actually got white bobbin thread, but there's my initial line of hand stitching. We're just going to remove that now because it's served its purpose. So just get your seam ripper in there and just break off that bit. Break off the other end. Should be able to just pull it through like that. Chuck that out. And whatever your pattern says to do next, it might be to, if this was a skirt or an apron, it might be to press that seam nice and flat with the raw edges pointing up, because later on you might want to be covering them over so that they're hidden. But that all depends on exactly what it is you're sewing. But there we go. Nice and easy, even gathers, simple as, we can do it. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Good luck with your gathering. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it. Please make comments below as well, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.